Okay, a search for an assassin begins, and I just want to remind you that there will be things on the test from this section, so it is something you're responsible to read. Now, just out of curiosity, as I ask you to read through this for today, if I gave a quiz today, how would we do on it? Okay, all right, good. All right, well, let's kind of go back to the assassination itself. After the assassination, police surrounded the Lorraine Motel, and they were looking for evidence, discovering that Dr. King was shot from a window of a boarding house about 5 feet away. And what happened, just kind of diagramming it, is there was a boarding house over here, and this is Lorraine Hotel, and he was on the balcony, and this is kind of an open area, so there really wasn't anything. It was kind of an open field between the two. Okay? Now, police announced that Dr. King was shot from the bathroom of a flop house across a field toward the Lorraine Motel. Does anybody know what a flop house is?
Yeah, halfway house?
Kind of. It's a really decrepit place that somebody might rent for a night or so. You know, somebody that was low income and maybe homeless for the night, or might just sneak into it. It's just a real low-key kind of scummy area. Well, in the bathroom of that flop house, which is across the field that we mentioned, they find a window jammed open with footprints on the bathroom floor. And a woman states that she saw a young white man fleeing from the boarding house shortly after 6 p.m. Okay, and do you remember when King was shot? Does anybody remember?
5:30.
About 5:30, okay? The man discarded a bulky package by a store doorway and sped off in a white Mustang. Pretty uncommon car at that time. You would be able to pick out a white Mustang pretty easily. Okay, the package that was dropped by the store doorway had the following items in it. It had 2 cans of beer, it had a pair of binoculars, it had some .30-06 ammunition, some various tools including a hammer and a portable radio, and a Remington 760 Game Master rifle with the scope. So that's what they found in that area, all 6 of those items. Now, the rifle was traced to a gun shop in Birmingham, Alabama, where records show it was purchased 6 days, I got day there, it was 6 days prior to the assassination. And the gun was kind of like the Oswald deal. It wasn't purchased under the person that used it. We'll find out it was purchased under the name of Harvey Lohmeyer. That's who the gun was purchased under. The fingerprints on the rifle belonged to a man by the name of James Earl Ray, and there's James Earl Ray right up there. Okay? Now, what Ray did is he took off in the white Mustang. He drove to Atlanta, Georgia, where he abandoned the car, and he flies to Toronto, Canada. And on May 7th, 1968, he arrives at Heathrow Airport in London, England, from Toronto, Canada. So he's gone from Memphis to Atlanta, to Toronto, to London, England after this assassination. He then flies to Lisbon, Portugal, then returns to London 10 days later, and he rents a room near London city centre. On June 8, 1968, more than 2 months after he shot and killed Dr. King, Ray is recognized at Heathrow Airport trying to fly to Belgium. I mean, this guy's going all over the place. But they recognize him at Heathrow Airport in London. Okay? He is arrested by London police, and he's charged with having a fake passport and carrying a firearm without a permit. And he knew he was the same guy that was in question for the assassination of Dr. King, so he was returned to the United States and formally charged with Dr. King's murder. Well, on March 10th, 1969, James Earl Ray went on trial in Memphis, and he was defended by attorney Percy Foreman. And Ray, under the advice of Foreman, pled guilty to the murder. And according to Foreman, Ray believed that the evidence was so overwhelming that he would be convicted and given the death sentence by electrocution in Tennessee. And he didn't want to die, and he believed a sentence in prison would give him the opportunity to escape, which he had done many times before during his life while he was jailed. So he pled guilty to the murder, and they did a plea bargain stating he would not what? Get the death sentence, okay? It's kind of like when you get in trouble at school. When I was principal, I would say, if you tell me the truth, I'll punish you the minimum I can, but if you lie to me, I'm going to crush you. Or if you make me go to a lot of work to find out what the real story was, then I'm going to punish you to the max. And that's kind of what you do here. He pleads guilty with the guarantee that they will not give him the death sentence. And he, in his mind, was thinking, well, that's fine. If I get 99 years in jail, which he's going to get, I'll probably be able to escape before my sentence is out. So he was sentenced to 99 years in prison in Tennessee as part of that agreement. Well, 3 days after his confession, he complained that he was innocent, and he stated he was misled by his attorney, Percy Foreman, and he was pressured into that plea of guilty. So he fires Foreman, and he hires J.B. Stoner to represent him, and he requests a new trial, which he is denied. Okay? Now, I want to get into another story here, and it has to do with this to a point. So he's denied an opportunity for a retrial. Well, I want you to know that during Martin Luther King's days alive during the Civil Rights Crusade, one of his biggest adversaries or enemies was FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover. In 1961, Hoover was convinced that the civil rights movement was being infiltrated by communists, and remember communism was a big deal then. And as a result, he ordered Dr. King's phones to be tapped. Okay, Hoover tapped everybody, even the president. He had Kennedy's phones tapped. He had everybody's phones tapped. Presidents were scared of this guy. This guy had more dirt on more people than you could even imagine. And he used it to his advantage if he had to. He was maybe the most powerful man in government. Everybody kind of feared J. Edgar Hoover because of information he had. And J. Edgar Hoover basically invented the FBI. Before it was the FBI, and he had been the FBI director forever. And he had some quirks about him that you could look up if you want to. But anyway, he ordered that Dr. King's phones be tapped, and he had FBI agents keep a close eye on him for the next 6 years. Okay? So, Hoover, because of his surveillance, had some of King's darkest secrets. King was a little bit of a, he wasn't much better than President Kennedy. He had women on the side, and FBI Director Hoover had tapes of that, so to speak. So he had a lot of dirt on him too. Now, Hoover once stated that he believed Martin Luther King was, quote, the most dangerous man in the United States. And shortly after the King assassination occurred, Hoover, along with Attorney General Ramsey Clark, began investigating the assassination. Here's Ramsey Clark right here. Okay? He was the Attorney General of the United States during this time. Okay? Who do you replace? Bobby Kennedy down the line. Yeah? Okay, so both Hoover and Clark investigate this King assassination, and they conclude that Ray acted alone in the killing. And that was no big deal, really. Interest kind of dwindled on the assassination. But in 1975, a link between the FBI and King's assassination resurfaced, okay, like 7 years later. And in mid-November of 1975, it was revealed that Dr. King had received a threatening letter from the FBI. And he received that letter shortly before he traveled to Oslo, Norway, to receive the Pulitzer Prize, the Nobel Peace Prize that he had won in 1964. And parts of this letter that he got from the FBI read this: King, there is only one thing left to do. You have just 34 days to do it. You are done. There is but one way out for you. What does that mean? He got this just before, 34 days before he was to go to Oslo and get the Pulitzer Prize. Or the Nobel Peace Prize, excuse me. So what are they saying to him? King, there's only one thing left to do. You have just 34 days to do it. You are done. There is but one way out for you. What are they basically saying he should do? Kill himself. Yeah, that's the letter he got from the FBI. They didn't want him going to Oslo, Norway, to pick up the Nobel Peace Prize, okay? Now, this new evidence that came out in mid-November of 1975 was a big reason that the House Assassination Committee was formed, just like it was, remember we talked about the Kennedy assassination, they did the same thing, and they reinvestigated King's assassination in 1976. So, in 1976, they put that committee together, and they began hearings in 1978. What's the difference between this and the Kennedy assassination? Guess who gets to testify at this new hearing? The assassin, James Earl Ray, where obviously Lee Harvey Oswald couldn't have done that. So the hearings begin in 1978. James Earl Ray testifies, and he testifies that he had fled to Canada after escaping from prison in 1967 and after serving 7 years of a 20-year sentence in the state of Missouri. So he was in prison in Missouri on a 20-year sentence for robbery, and he escaped in 1967 and fled to Canada. He said that when he got to Canada, he met a mysterious man with a Spanish accent who used the alias Raul. This is what he told the committee. And Ray stated that he went to work for Raul, bringing contraband such as drugs and guns into the United States and Mexico. And he also testified that this Raul told him to get a room in Memphis for a few days and was asked by Raul to buy a rifle. This is what he's telling the committee. And Ray was to deliver it to Raul the day before King was shot. And Ray states, you know, I made the delivery and departed, never saw Raul or the rifle again. So he basically stated that he was at a Memphis garage getting a tire fixed when Dr. King was shot. So this is what he tells this new committee that he investigated this in 1978. Well, Ray further stated that the reason that he took off and did everything he did is because he panicked at all the police activity after the assassination because he was an escaped convict from prison. So he explained his actions after the assassination was, I was just scared, I saw this police action, I'm an escaped convict, etc. Well, the Congressional Committee didn't believe Ray, and it concluded that this Raul never existed, and James Earl Ray actually died in prison on April 23rd, 1998, claiming to the end that he was innocent. Okay? So there you go, save you some notes. Does anybody have any questions on that or how that worked? Okay, interesting story, and he did contend till the day he was died. He actually convinced Dexter King, remember who Dexter King was? Martin Luther King's son. He actually convinced Dexter King that he did not shoot his father. I'm not sure Martin Luther King III or the sisters believed that much, or Mrs. King did, but he had a pretty good story going. Okay, but anyway, that's a pretty rare autograph right there. That's the wanted by the FBI poster that went up with the $100,000 reward, and that's just his signature that I got out of a book that he wrote. Okay, that'll take us to our last subtopic of this test material, and it's entitled "The World Witnesses a Civil Rights Protest, the 1968 Summer Olympic Games." This is an interesting scenario. Now, there's lots of major sporting events in our country that we pay attention to. The World Series is a big event that draws a lot of people. The Super Bowl is a big event. The World Cup soccer, when it's held in the United States, brings a big event. But probably the thing that gets the most national spotlight, because it only happens once every 4 years, are the Olympics. And we have two different types of Olympics, don't we? What type do we have? Summer and winter. Okay, and obviously the Winter Olympics deal with things you can do in the winter, and the Summer Olympics are more things you can do in the summer. And the focus of the Summer Olympics is usually track and field, although there's lots of other activities. There's shooting and all kinds of different things. Well, the 1968 Olympic Games were scheduled to be held, the Summer Olympics, in Mexico City, Mexico. Okay, so that's what's happening. And we're in the middle of the Civil Rights Movement, and we're going to have a lot of Olympians that are black. Okay, and so the events that happened at the 1968 Summer Olympic Games are probably the most noticeable protest of the decade, and arguably during the major event of that time, which was the Summer Olympics. What happened is, in simple terms, is there's a lot of events. Well, in the 200-meter run, you tracksters, and certainly Shana knows what that is because she's good at that. In the 200-meter run, in the finals, Tommy Smith of the United States wins the gold, and John Carlos of the United States wins the bronze, which means he got third. Okay? So in the 200-meter run, in the 1968 Summer Olympics held in Mexico City, Mexico, Tommy Smith wins the gold and John Carlos wins the bronze in the 200-meter run. the man that placed third, or excuse me, the man that placed second was Peter Norman, who was an athlete from Australia. He placed second. So Tommy Smith wins the gold. For the United States, Australian Peter Norman wins the silver, and American John Carlos wins the bronze during the 200-meter run. Well, we all know what happens in the Olympics. It's a cool thing. Whoever wins first, or the gold in whatever events, they have a medal ceremony and give all three their medal, but they play the national anthem of the winner. Okay, we all know that. We've seen it many, many times. And they stand up on the podium. It's kind of a big deal. Well, both Smith and Carlos had a plan. They were going to do something unusual and controversial during that medal ceremony when the American flag was raised and they played the Star-Spangled Banner. And if you look at Olympic Games, Olympians normally stand proud, hands over hearts. A lot of them tear up. It's an emotional time. Well, these guys had a little different plan. Well, before the plan, they had these buttons, okay? And the buttons supported the Movement for Human Rights Project. Okay? They were buttons. They were similar in a way to those buttons I have over there from the March on Washington, similar philosophy, but it was supporting the Movement for Human Rights Project, which is on your ID sheet. And they were little buttons about this big. And prior to the ceremony, Carlos and Smith had buttons on their sweatsuits, and they gave one to Norman, who chose to put it on his as well. Okay? So these three buttons were given out, part of their plan, and the buttons were placed in each of the athletes' sweatsuits. Not too controversial. Well, during the playing of the national anthem is when the controversy started. And both Smith and Carlos, they had one pair of black gloves. And Smith took one glove, the right hand, and Carlos took the other glove, the left hand. And during the national anthem, they bowed their heads in protest with the black glove above them like this and like this. And if you look back at that picture above the closet, you see a real good picture of what they did. They put their heads down during the national anthem and raised their black gloves, which signified what? Black power. Okay? Or, if you're not even that radical, it signified that by sure they were looking for equal rights in America concerning civil rights. Okay? It's up to the what? Perception of each person that sees it, what they think it is. It's going to range from, hey, you know, they're just protesting, you know, in their own way, and to the point where people are just mad because they're supporting the Black Panthers, and I mean, it's just nuts how people perceive it. Okay? They also wore black scarves. And on national television, as you can imagine, this did not go over very well. Did it not? Okay? Well, after they made their move, both Smith and Carlos were suspended from the games, and they were expelled from the Olympic Village for promoting black power, for making a political statement during that time. Went over very poorly. You got to remember, this is 1968. So both Smith and Carlos were suspended from the games and expelled from the Olympic Village. Were they stripped of their medals? No. A lot of people think they were, but they were not expelled. Or excuse me, they did not take their medals. They simply expelled them from the village. What does that mean?
Can't stay.
You got to go, man. You got to pack your crap up and leave. So, the point being is they kept their medals. They were suspended from the games. In other words, they could not participate in any more events. And they told them to leave or they were expelled from the village. Now, this was really a bad situation. Okay? And it went over very poorly back in the United States. And you know what it did? It put pressure on other black athletes during the games. Why?
Because they weren't given.
They were, this was something they were expected to do. Okay? And there were some athletes, like Bob Beamon, for example, right here, who set a new world record in the long jump who did not, during his medal ceremony, do such a thing. Okay? There was a lot of black athletes that really felt the pressure was put on them. Okay? Now we'll speak about this because Abby was very nice and did me a tremendous favor. But yeah, there's a picture of Bob Beamon. Now, the story by Bob Beamon is when he long jumped in the 1968 Olympic Games, he broke the world record by over a foot, which was just incredible. Matter of fact, he jumped pretty much out of the pit. They didn't expect that anybody could jump that far. And when he made one of his jumps, I mean, everybody gasped because he jumped basically out of the pit. There wasn't any pit, and he broke the world record by over a foot, which was just an incredible thing in 1968. Then a fellow by the name of Mike Powell, and the record at the time was 29 feet 2.5 inches. That's what Beamon jumped. And next to that, you can see the Sports Illustrated cover of Mike Powell, who jumped 29 feet 4.5 inches, and eventually jumped farther than that. He was at those Simplot Games. Who all went to that? Abby? And Abby got that for me, which I thought was just so nice because it ties in pretty good, doesn't it? Okay? But anyway, so there were some positive things in the Summer Olympic Games, but there certainly were some negatives. So those guys were kicked out, sent home, took incredible amounts of crap, if you could imagine, at home, and became a little bit ostracized. Okay?
He came down into the tent to do something.
Did he? Well, there you go. If he comes next time. Now there's another. I was getting on Abby a little bit for not getting me the Fosbury autograph. It would have been very nice. But yeah, he did the Fosbury flop. First one not to do the scissor kick. Another story. He did well in the '68 Olympics, by the way. But anyway, it was a positive Olympics, but this thing really threw a nut, kind of a nut in a wrench, so to speak. Now, I told you that Norman won the silver medal. And he actually set an Australian record which still stands from that particular Olympics. He ran 20.06.